That's right. This Week in Challengers is back after faster than a week. We need to get back on our regular recording schedule. And of course, Elite Season 4 is kicking off. We just had the qualifiers wrap up. And boy, do we have some groups to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to be diving into it, making our predictions on who makes it out of both groups to be able to get to that Elite Season 4. It is going to be a wild ride. And we got a lot to talk about. So let's dive in. This Week in Challengers. So obviously this week, Elite Season 4 kicks off in the group stage. We're going to talk about those 4 teams from North America who were able to secure those 4 spots. That's what we talked about last week. We said, hey, you know, North America, pretty even keeled where there's only the normal 4 spots that are there. So we have, of course, the 8 teams from Elite Season 3 coming on back, and we had to play through to find these 4 teams filling out those 4 spots. And I gotta say, of teams that made it through, we kind of made a little bit of predictions, and I think we did pretty solid, my man, figuring out of who was gonna make it on. So we have, obviously, the Telluride Bush make it on through. We have what is now being called the Stush, in being the Stallions Bush roster, make it on through. We have what is now also the Family Ties Atlantis Esports group going through. This is a little bit weird because there was like Family Ties Carolina Reapers and then Family Ties Atlantis Esports. So this is the Atlantis Esports roster that made it on through of Cootie, Seawads, Derek the Goat, and Darkside. And then we have that Cabal roster as well of Rispy Flames, Dimensions, and Zvik. So that's going to round out your 4 that is there. Before we dive into some of the elite conversations, let's talk about at least just this qualifier and name it, because I think that at least this was a good first look for some of these rosters that are coming together. This is what we always love about the qualifiers, right? Is that when you get a lot of the big dogs out, how do some of the mainstays look against some of these teams?
Yeah, I think this was a good one for Bush in terms of business was handled, right? They had to make it relatively simple for us to think that it was even remotely a good performance because you expected to walk out of this so comfortably. So you dropped the 1 map, but other than that, pretty straightforward, really. Good stuff out of them. For Stush, now, obviously, we didn't really know what to expect. Now, do we think this is going to be a good team? Yeah, sure. But, like, also, it's a weird one that's kind of come together here. You've got, obviously, Okis coming back down from the league. You've got Swooty, who's coming off of the Huntsman run. Skill, this 18-year-old that we aren't sure what to make of yet and know what his ceiling is. And then Manny, who feels like he's been passed around a little bit this year. Sometimes the fall guy, sometimes the superstar. Where does he really land in the end? And this could be a great spot for all 4 of them. So I'm glad they got there eventually. He needed a game 5 against that Darkside roster at one point in order to get there. But yeah, all right, they get through without losing a single series. So looks pretty solid. I think the only one that we didn't predict was the Darkside roster, if I remember right. I think we, or at least maybe I did. I had Family Ties, I had Symbols and Co getting through. They unfortunately lose in back-to-back qualification matches, which has got to suck. That is a really tough one. But then Cabal get it done after losing initially to the Stush. They will get themselves through in a comfortable 3-0 in the end. So yeah, kind of a lot of business as usual. I guess the most hotly contested one was going to be the Darkside Family Ties one, and well, Family Ties still won. Don't.
It's like one of those ones where you're like, if you're Family Ties, you're like, yeah, we're happy no matter what. Like, we're getting at least one roster. I'm sure obviously they would have loved to get maybe both and try and pull a Telluride Bush scenario there. But I think, you know, you hit it right on the head, which is, for me, I'm looking at that Stush run, which is like you 3-0, boom. Okay, probably pretty simple. But you do go game 5 against a very formidable Challengers roster. You're able to come out on top. And then you go up against a very formidable Cabal roster, right? That's there as well. And if you're Stush, this actually should be really, really solid for you, because look at this, man. You have basically your sister team or your big brother team in the Bush who makes it through the qualifiers, who you probably have scrimmed a fair amount against. I've been seeing some screenshots hit the timeline. That's there. And then the other 2 teams that qualify in through this qualifier are teams that you beat in order to get there, right? So you're probably looking at that and you're saying, okay, of the 12 teams that are here, we probably feel pretty good, at least around 3 of them. So now here's a little bit of confidence that you should be able to have going in, of course, to the elite that's there. But for seeing, you know, for these other 2 rosters, like you mentioned, for that, I'm going to, the Family Ties Atlantis is what I'll call them for lack of a better word at this point. For that roster, I think this is sort of what we see in Challengers sometimes, which is towards the back half of the year. We see sort of the 4 puzzle pieces coming together and maybe finding some momentum that could really move them through. And per our conversation, last week, man, this is a team that probably has some solid pro points behind them as well. They've been in challengers, kind of a long time. They might be able to kind of string some stuff together, kind of just maybe get a little bit streaky, find themselves obviously in the conversation when it gets there. And then obviously this Cabal roster is one I think that we're excited to watch. I know Cabal has been pretty, they've been obviously active in challengers all year long, trying to find that roster that can come together, really represent their org well. And it feels like maybe this one could be there. I feel like as opposed to last season with Elite Season 3 and some of the teams that qualified, these feel like very 4 solid teams to sort of round out the overall picture. It doesn't really feel like there's any just sort of dog walk teams that, won't put up a fight that's there. These are 4 very solid rosters to be able to make it.
No, fully agreed. I think that this is going to be a great elite, basically. And we know how much is on the line. You and me covered this last week, right? Well, last week, 3 days ago, whatever it was. And we kind of talked about just how much is really like hanging the balance right now. The pro point situation, as you said, is quite interesting. Atlantis might actually have the lowest out of all the teams that are going to be there. It's still a heavy 80,000 pro points, but it is, it's going to be a case of them trying to obviously lift that as high as possible, but get the best possible practice in for any sort of qualification, last chance qualifier sort of stuff that's going to come on through the back of the year. So, yeah, you put yourself in the right place to do it. And we know with the NPC meta, and if you hit the form at the right time and all the new maps and stuff coming in, you never know. You light up the scene at the right time. We could see you at EWC later on this year.
But obviously, now that we have those 4 teams who are to play through the qualifier, we now have our total 12 that'll be playing through the North American Elite Season 4. And very quickly, we actually had our groups almost like right after the qualifier was wrapped up. So thankfully, that was easy to figure out. Shout out Josh, obviously, over at Challenger Stats, or not Josh, sorry, Ben. Wow, there's too many people that we have in this scene going on through. For tweeting these out, because this is really, really fun to be able to see. Not only do we have the groups, we also have what seeding they're going in on, which actually does matter a lot at the end of the day. So let's kick it off, man. You and I looked at these groups when they came out. We were talking to each other about it. The Grim Reaper is coming here for Group A, ladies and gentlemen. Because, dear God, we've talked about groups of deaths over these last couple seasons of Elite. This is definitively the group of death that we have had in Challengers this year, dude. Telluride Bush, Omit Brooklyn, Stallions Cod, Cabal, Stush, and Torn. I don't really know where to start with this.
No, it's absolutely fucking gross. And the thing is, as well, like the 15th seed there in Torn, everyone's going to be like, all right, well, maybe they're the walkover. This is Hitman, Dak, TK, and Mince, the team that survived last season. So, they're no pushover, that's for sure. Especially when you consider that Bush, for example, did not and had to requalify. So, this is a ridiculously stacked group, sorry. As you've kind of read them out there, Bush, who've won, 4 cups and Elite and all this kind of stuff over the year, a bloody Open now. Brooklyn, who've been assembling themselves a real task force recently and have a list of victories from their year. Stallions, the more you read this team, even the Cabal rosters, Flames, Vic, and Cole didn't get through. Oh, yeah, they did. Flames, Vic, Dimensions, and Rispy, they get through. It's just, I don't know. And then obviously this Stush roster that we don't fully know what to make of it yet, but we've just talked about how basically 2 of the teams that you beat in the qualifier have qualified and are going to be around. So you're better than several of the teams in the Elite. So yeah, I think this is as stacked as we've gotten all year. Because it feels like all year we've kind of had 3 really good teams and 3, you could kind of draw a line as to where the divide is. Sometimes you've had 4 teams and then 2 that are just absolute burgers. And I say that respectfully, you've made it to an Elite, but this feels like, okay, any of these teams could get through this group stage and any of them could not.
I feel like the only one that I feel confident about saying, we'll kind of go into a little bit of our predictions here a little bit. The only one I feel super confident in being they make it out of this group actually is Bush. Just because obviously they're coming off of a Major 3 win. They've been looking really good. They're one of the few rosters who stuck together, right? They're now, they're finding the fire. Now, my thing is, as long as they can continue that momentum, because unfortunately, that is the one thing we have seen with the Bush, where sometimes they can have these really high moments, and then right after, they can kind of let it slip, right? This is not a moment that you can let it slip. You have to still be on your top form, which, if you are, you're probably not worried about this group as much that's there. But after that, man, I don't feel super confident. Like, I want to say omit Brooklyn should be another shoo-in, but the problem is that we've also seen some stumbles from them along the way as well, right? In some of these sort of in the open and in some of these tournaments that have been happening recently, like, you know, Brooklyn, they'll sometimes just kind of drop these series against teams that you're like, whoa, okay, did not expect that. And when you're looking at a group of this caliber, I think there's a really strong chance that either Stallions, Cabal, Stush, or Torn could steal away a series from Brooklyn, and all of a sudden now your standings are looking completely weird and definitely off the line. But if I just had to go top of my head, if I had to pick 4, I think I'm gonna go with Bush, Brooklyn, Stallions, and Stush. I think that's where I'm going with that. I don't feel confident in my picks, though. I will be very clear.
I can tell.
I do not feel super confident, but if I had to pick 4, gun to the head, that's what I'm picking.
Yeah, I'm with you on Bush, Brooklyn, but then I'll join you on Stallions because we've always been a fan of the Icons Rupa KB trio, and then obviously Gio's joined in on that. But fuck, picking a 4th out of that is not easy. Like, I don't mind the Cabal team at all. The Stush roster's interesting. You know, I might go Torn just to throw like something in there because they survived last time out. Yeah. Why not? But the thing is, like, even saying like, oh yeah, well, Bush are guaranteed. Now, I agree with you. I think the Bush should be guaranteed.
Should be.
But I said this last time out. They exit in the group stages, and who did they lose to? Notorious. You won't have to deal with them here. That's fine. Yeah. Brooklyn, you will have to deal with them again. They lost 3-1. And Cabal, they lost in a game 5, which was actually the decider between them making it through and not making it through. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, you had the Atlanta Open where you beat the vast majority of these teams. Brooklyn was one of the teams that they saw off on the way to winning in the end. So they've made amends, sure. But I don't know, man. Like, online called on the day sometimes. I get a little bit nervous, and I'm hoping that Bush do cruise through. Otherwise, all of our pickings are just completely in the shitter. So I don't really know at this point.
Yeah, it definitely feels like this is going to be whoever turns up on the day. Now, one thing that Bush don't have to worry about, you don't have the FaZe Falcons, now the Riyadh Falcons Academy team, there in your group anymore as well. So, okay, great. You know, you're probably looking at, I think if Bush kind of keeps a level head, they look at the rest of the teams and say, we're not worried about going against any of these, then that's great. Those kind of have me wonder if you get down to one of those weird scenarios where Bush has a little bit of a buffer and another team needs to win for Stush to then make it through because of some head-to-head shenaniganry. Who knows, right? Who knows what type of mind games could come out there once we get into those final moments. But either way, man, I think you and I are going to be locked. Very excited to see at least the first week here with this Group A, because I think we're gonna get some very high tier, very high caliber matches. It is going to be a very fun watch. But the fun part of this as well is, unless we just said Group A was the group of death, Group B in North America is also just as competitive. I feel like, man, I think it's easy to look at this group and you say, yeah, you know, this group is easier, but it's like, we're talking about the 9th versus 8th circle of hell, I feel like, when we talk about some of these teams, right? You have Notorious, you have Huntsmen, who are now coming in with Awakening, like we mentioned last week, in for Swooty. You have Omnia, which is really just that old for fun roster of all ex-CDL talent that is here. You have the Riyadh Falcons Academy team, which is the old FaZe Falcons roster. So basically, Saudi Demons plus Aluka. Have fun with that one. Bittersweet coming on through, which is Fellow and Co. And then the Family Ties Atlantis Esports that we were talking about as well, which is of course that Cootie Siwas, Derek the Goat, and Darkside roster as well. So this also still feels hyper competitive, Enigma. I think probably if you're Notorious, it's similar to what we were talking about with Bush on the other side. Notorious probably feeling very comfortable in this group. Huntsman probably feeling a little bit more comfortable, but even then, they're coming in with a roster change, dude. You're not coming in with that same level of comfort that maybe you had if Swooty was still on the team, right? So Group B still going to be a gauntlet, no matter who you are.
No, without a doubt. I mean, you talk about teams towards the bottom end there. Bittersweet. This is Fellow and Co, if I remember correctly. Yes. So yeah, Fellow, Proto, Peel, and Nate. And then you've got, I mean, Family Ties, the Atlantis roster you talked about. This is DTG, QT, Wads, Darkside. Again, it's a roster that, do I fully expect them to make it through? No. And in fact, if I was to go with my predictions, I think I go with Notorious, Huntsman, Omnia, and Falcons.
Yep.
By the way, anyone who is unsure, Omnia would loaned the roster by fourth one. Not sure how all that works, but whatever. But the bittersweet Family Ties roster, I look at them and I'm kind of like, well, you definitely have it in you to pull off like 2 shock results in that group, and that would be enough to get you out. So I don't know, man. It's tough. I think it's a little less dense than Group A, because Group A, literally, if any of those 6 make it out, I'm like, sure thing, brother. Be like, yeah, whatever. I think if Family Ties get out, I will be impressed. Bittersweet. The only thing that's weird about this team for me is whether or not they can make adaptations in this current meta. I think sometimes Fellow in particular struggles a little bit when it starts to become very sub heavy. But I don't know, man. He's led his team to glory, not too long ago, very recently. It's the reason he stuck around forever. And it's a dangerous squad. But it's just the one thing for me that kind of comes into it, and when, as you said there about the Huntsman, is that change. Like, how much of an impact is that going to have to a team that we should have at the very top? Because if suddenly they aren't at that standard and they start dropping weird maps, that's when it comes down to awkward tiebreaker situations. That's how these leagues often play out. So there, for me, the X factor on how this whole group plays out. Yeah,
and I think if you're the Huntsman, the one good thing you have about 2 weeks worth of scrims leading into this first, sort of day of games, right? This isn't like you had to make a change last second and now you're immediately getting thrown into the fire, like potentially some of these teams had to do going into like a qualifier, for example, right? So the fact that you've had 2 weeks of scrims, I think bodes well. The other thing is that this isn't also just a rando, right? This is also Awakening. Have whatever criticisms you want, still a professional in this space, right? Has been in this situation before of coming onto a new team. He's going to have some respect. He understands what it means to slot into a system, is a good Call of Duty player, right? At the end of the day. So it's not like you're trying to bring in a young gun X factor, maybe like a Skill or Wevy, who, you're kind of trying to mold and shape and form. Like, no, there's an expectation with Awakening joining the team. And so I'm right there with you that I think with that being said, you have 2 weeks of scrims to fall back on. I think the Huntsman should be pretty solid. So if I'm going to pick my 4 out of this, I got some of the rosters on the screen here. I am going P7, Huntsman. It's hard to root against that Omnia team just because of sort of the firepower they have. Yuli, Mac, Arcides, and Asim. That's there. But after that, man, for a 4th, I mean, I like the Falcons Academy roster, and I think, having a Luca on that team is gross. And I just want to see them basically because I think that's a squad that has a lot of firepower and can really bring it to any roster that we have in challengers, right? So they make it out of the group stage to get to that bracket. I think that they are not a free team, and I think they make it overall more competitive than some of these other rosters that are there. So I'm going to go with Falcons Academy, Omnia, Huntsman, and Project Notorious. Those are going to be my 4 making it out of there, which I think, I don't know, which yet again I don't feel super confident in, but I'm gonna say it either way.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking as well about the repercussions of this, because basically right now the top 4 in terms of pro points: Bush 324, 324,000, Notorious 301, Huntsman 247, Brooklyn 234, basically 235. Stallions 214. The Omnia roster 210. The Falcons 203. So it's incredibly tight. And like, if you make a run right now off the elite, get yourself a whole chunk of points, couple of cups into Challenger Champs, again, could be the difference maker in terms of you getting inside that top 4 or not. So this is very much so do it all kind of moment, very much so do or die. Start of a road that could lead to some glory this year, man.
I know it was definitely a little bit of a shorter episode this week, but we at least want to get our thoughts and our predictions out there for these groups, because I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about them before the first set of games that happened this week, and also just to get back on our normal cadence. I know we were shifted towards the weekend because of DreamHack, but hey, we're back. We're here now. We're locked in, keeping our eyes ahead, of course, to everything happening in this elite, and also gearing up towards those Challengers Champs and eventually the Esports World Cup that's there. But I mean, Enigma, when we look at the slate of games that are going to be ahead of us here, I think if you are maybe a fan of Challengers, you're eating good this week.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad that you are. And I'm a little bit sad to say this because it is the last elite of the season. It feels like 5 minutes ago when you and me kind of said, all right, let's run a podcast in the space, see how it goes, right? It'll be all right. It just keeps us honest and keeps us up to date with everything. And obviously I've enjoyed every second of it. But also it's a case of, for all these players now, you're probably also in the same boat of like, wow, it felt like 5 minutes ago I was loading into BO7, learning the maps, learning the rotations, trying to get myself to that first elite, and all of a sudden the bus stops here and only takes on through essentially a handful to the next stages of the year and the final hurdles, essentially. So yeah, been an absolute blast. Looking forward to what we've got coming up, and hoping that the fans have a hell of a time with it.
Well, let us know. You heard our predictions for who makes it out of Group A and Group B in North America. We want to hear what you have to say. What teams do you have making it out of their group, and who do you think is going to be battling it on out and getting to that bracket? It is going to be a hell of a week when it comes to challengers. But I know, like we said, it's a little bit shorter episode. That's all we got for you. So we will see you next week when we cover everything going on in challengers.